Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. The movie begins with Lucio Okubia, running from a farmer who caught him stealing crops. Lucio stole to survive, because his father is very sick. On his father's deathbed, he asks Lucio to take care of his older sister. Lucio promises to find a way to provide for them. The next day, Lucio decides to rob a bank. He asks the bank staff for money, but they refuse. Desperate, he pulls out a knife, and threatens them, but is so scared he wets himself. The staff lets him leave, and tells him to go home. When he gets home, his sister hugs him, and tells him their father has died. The next day, he is shocked to find his sister packing. She tells him it is time for him to join the military, as all boys have to serve for 10 years, starting at age 13. He doesn't want to join, but his sister insists it is necessary for his future. Reluctantly, he agrees. 10 years later, Lucio is an adult in Paris. He visits his sister's apartment, which he gave her while he was in the military. He tells her he left the camp due to bad food, and hasn't completed his service. She is upset, he quit so close to finishing. She is married to Patrick Kane, an accountant in Paris. Lucio wants to work with Patrick, but without an education, Patrick can only offer him a job as a construction worker. He takes the job eagerly. On his first day, he hears construction workers talking about anarchism, a belief in a society without a state. Curious, Lucio says he supports it, even though he doesn't fully understand. The workers invite him to help spread anarchist flyers, and learn more. He becomes fascinated, and sees anarchism as his new purpose. At night, he lets Kiko, a friend of a friend, stay at his apartment. Kiko arrives with a large suitcase, full of guns, and is a wanted bank robber. Lucio thinks Kiko is cool, and is excited when Kiko invites him to rob a bank tomorrow. During the robbery, Lucio's old fear returns, and he wets himself again. Kiko reassures him, saying it's normal to be nervous, and advises him to stay calm, and focus on getting as much money as possible. They escape before the police arrive. Kiko explains that the stolen money will fund anarchist activities, and help poor families. Lucio feels like a modern-day Robin Hood. A few days later, they plan another robbery, and ask Lucio's friend Ostiello to drive them. During the heist, Ostiello leaves the car running, drawing a police officer's attention. Kiko and Lucio flee, shooting at the police car. The police start investigating, and raid their place, but Lucio is later released, when no evidence is found. The bank manager identifies his voice as similar to the robbers. Lucio never sees Kiko again, and later reads in the newspaper that he has died. Devastated, Lucio decides to honor Kiko, by continuing his work. He and Ostiello rob another bank, and use the money to buy a small printing press. Lucio hires Sean to run it. Two women, Anne and a student supporting the anarchist movement, order brochures, and invites Lucio to a campus demonstration. He, who has developed feelings for Anne, attends the demonstration, and is impressed by her speech, and invites her to join his anarchist group. While chatting, a riot breaks out. Lucio takes Anne to a riverbank, and confesses he is an anarchist, and a bank robber, but his goal is to help the poor, like Robin Hood. She is intrigued. Their relationship grows, and they begin dating. At the printing press, they all watch news about the US attacking Cuba. Frustrated by this, Sean suggests using the printing press for a bigger cause. Lucio decides to print counterfeit money, to aid Cuba. He takes Anne to meet his brother-in-law Patrick, who has been unemployed, and shares his plan to print counterfeit money, and offers Patrick a job. Patrick agrees, and they start printing bills. Lucio exchanges them for real money, and distributes it to poor anarchist families. During this time, Anne reveals she is pregnant, making Lucio extremely happy. The next day, he visits the Cuban embassy, with his plan to weaken the US economy, by flooding the market with counterfeit dollars, causing an economic crisis. The Cuban embassy is impressed, and advises him to go to the airport tomorrow, to meet with the Cuban Prime Minister directly. The next day at the airport, he meets with the Cuban Prime Minister, to present his plan. The Prime Minister praises his idea, but is pessimistic about the chances of a small country like Cuba successfully challenging the powerful US. Lucio is disappointed by the Prime Minister's lack of optimism. As Lucio is about to leave, a panicked man rushes up, and warns him the police has discovered their plan. The inspector and other officers are searching for him. To escape, Lucio throws money into the air, to create chaos, and then uses the confusion to slip away. He changes clothes to disguise himself, but the inspector sees through the disguise, and orders his men to surround him. He is caught and jailed. Months later, he is released from prison. Overjoyed, he immediately goes to see Anne, who had just given birth to their daughter. 8 years pass, and Lucio has reformed, working as a construction worker, without engaging in criminal activity. One day, his foreman pays him with a check. Lucio is unfamiliar with checks, but is pleased to learn they can be cashed at a bank. After work, he picks up Anne and their daughter from school. Anne and Lucio are married and volunteer at the school. They go shopping at the supermarket, where he discovers he doesn't have enough cash for groceries. The cashier informs him he can use the check to pay. Realizing how easy it is to use a check, his old criminal instincts resurface. At night, at the printing house, he gathers with Sean, Patrick and Osgello. He proposes a new plan to counterfeit checks from Citibank, a major international bank with weak security for checks. He believes it will be easier to create fake checks, since the penalties for counterfeiting private items are lighter than for state property. The group agrees, and begins working on the checks. After several attempts, they succeed in making convincing fake checks. Lucio tests one at a bank, and is able to cash it without issue. Although successful, he decides not to act rashly. He plans to distribute the task of cashing the checks across multiple cities in France, to make it harder for the police to track them down. He instructs the group to cash the checks simultaneously. The plan goes smoothly, and the money is distributed as before, some for demonstrations, some to support poor families, and the rest for themselves. However, weeks later, Citibank discovers the counterfeit checks. They send a bank manager named Barrow to report the fraud to the French police, dismissing their work as slow. The inspector, insulted, assures Barrow that he will find the culprits quickly, as he already has a lead on where to look. The next day, while Lucio is picking up his wife and daughter from school, the inspector arrives and shows him a fake check. The inspector asks if he made the check. Lucio calmly says he knows nothing about it, claiming to be a reformed man and an ordinary construction worker. After answering, Lucio hurriedly leaves. At home, Anne is upset after overhearing the conversation. She is disappointed Lucio has returned to crime without telling her. Despite his attempts to explain, she does not agree with his actions. She believes there are other ways to make a positive impact, like her offer to become a volunteer nurse in Bolivia. She suggests he can use his skills to help build infrastructure there, but he refuses. Even when she threatens to take their daughter to Bolivia, he does not change his mind. At night, the team meets at the printing house. They hear on the radio that starting tomorrow, French banks will only cash one check per day. Jan suggests they stop their activities, to avoid putting other anarchist members at risk. He recommends selling the fake checks abroad. Lucio recalls a convict he knew from prison, Charlie, and decides to ask for his help in finding a foreign buyer. The next day, Lucio meets him, who agrees to help find a buyer. A few days later, Charlie introduces Lucio and Osgello to Tony, a potential buyer from America. Tony offers to buy the fake checks for $1 million, but needs 2 days to prepare the money. Lucio decides to sell the checks, and then go to Bolivia with Anne, to avoid being traced by the police. He arranges for the transaction to take place at a restaurant 2 days later. When Lucio returns home, he finds his sister, Patrick, and Jan at his apartment. They are terrified, believing they are being followed by the police. His sister is angry, and blames Lucio for involving Patrick in his criminal activities. Jan, scared of the police, decides to quit, and Anne is frustrated with his selfishness. On the day of the transaction, Lucio sees a police car monitoring his apartment. He asks Anne to help distract the police, but she refuses, and gives him a plane ticket, saying goodbye. Lucio creates a commotion to divert attention, and escapes unnoticed. At the restaurant where the transaction is to happen, Lucio sees Osgello waiting, but as Tony arrives, the police ambush and arrest him. In prison, Lucio meets with his lawyer, and angrily accuses someone of leaking his plans to the police. The lawyer reveals that Patrick has managed to escape, and is suspected of betraying him. Shocked by the betrayal, he learns that Citibank's manager, Barrow, has sued him heavily. If Barrow's demands are met, he can face 20 years in prison, and a $50 million fine. Desperate and regretful, Lucio awaits his trial. Just before the trial begins, his lawyer requests a postponement, due to misprinted files. Barrow is frustrated, and suspects the delay might allow Lucio to escape, but the judge has no choice, but to grant the postponement. Lucio is granted parole until the next trial. The French newspapers call him the Robin Hood of France, which annoys Barrow. He demands the inspector punish Lucio severely, but the inspector can do nothing against the judge's decision. The next day, Lucio meets Patrick at a bar, clearly annoyed. He confronts Patrick about his betrayal. Patrick explains he wasn't a traitor, he had been approached by a police officer, who offered money to leak information. but he refused, fearing the situation would worsen. To protect himself, Patrick had taken his wife out of the city until things settled. Lucio realizes he had wrongly accused Patrick, and wonders who the real traitor was. At night, his lawyer visits, and reveals that Charlie, not Patrick, had betrayed him. Tony, the prospective buyer, was an informant from the American police. Charlie worked with Tony to set up Lucio. The lawyer also informs that the trial is imminent. Unable to sleep, Lucio is suddenly threatened by an unknown caller, who says he will be killed if he doesn't surrender. He goes to the inspector, suspecting Barrow's involvement, but the inspector can't help without evidence. However, he agrees to support Lucio, because he dislikes Barrow. With this support, Lucio rushes to the cemetery, to retrieve his fake check prints. He decides to play along with Barrow's game. At night, he prints as many fake checks as possible, and distributes them to all anarchist members. He instructs them to sell the checks to tourists across France, causing chaos to the international banking system. A few days later, his plan succeeds. Barrow receives a call, informing him fake checks are spreading globally. Realizing it is Lucio's doing, he is faced with a dilemma. Lucio, calling Anne from a public phone, expresses his regret for not joining her in Bolivia, but promises to make it there soon. During the call, the police arrive, and arrest Lucio for distributing fake checks worldwide. At the police station, he meets Barrow, and calmly proposes a deal. He offers to hand over all counterfeit check prints, and cease his activities, if Barrow withdraws the lawsuit and pays him a sum of money. Lucio warns that if Barrow refuses, the fake checks will continue to circulate, costing Citibank money. Faced with no other options, Barrow reluctantly accepts his terms. The next day, Lucio and Barrow meet at a hotel, where Lucio hands over the counterfeit checks. Barrow asks him to guarantee he will not print more fake checks. Lucio agrees to stop printing, but doesn't guarantee anything, knowing Barrow has no choice but to trust him. After the deal, Jan and Ostello meet Lucio in the hotel lobby, thrilled to see him free and successful against a powerful opponent. A few days later, Lucio joins Anne in Bolivia. She is overjoyed to see him. He vows that even though his anarchist group in France has been disbanded, his struggle is not over. He is determined to continue his fight, believing anarchism is his life's mission. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Turn on the notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out.